any person who has witnessed genocide in the past, who has experienced being a refugee, the Iraqis, the Afghanis, the Congolese, the African Americans, everyone who's experienced racism, the natives, the indigenous, what happens is your genes wake up. Just as you say, your genes have changed. People's genes of trauma wake up in this time because this is reminiscent. It activates their senses to what their ancestors have felt.
Welcome back to a fresh new episode of The Tea with me, Myriam Francois. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode of The Tea. If you want to support the show and help shape future episodes, join our Patreon community. Think of it as the resistance. Plus, if you're in our top tier, you'll get access to ad-free episodes. The link's in our bio. Today, I want to talk about trauma. For 2 years, Palestinians have endured what the UN now officially calls genocide, an era marked by the largest cohort of child amputees in history. 70% of the infrastructure in Gaza has been reduced to rubble. There's been relentless displacement, drone attacks, bombs, snipers shooting toddlers. We all remember 5-year-old Hind Rajab, who was shot hundreds of times as she called for help. The mass graves, the execution of journalist Anas al-Sharif and hundreds more of his colleagues, as well as health workers. Soldiers taunting starving families, babies abandoned to die in incubators. And the onslaught continues, as does the trauma. UNICEF estimates that nearly every child in Gaza, that's 1.2 million children, needs urgent mental health intervention. And for those of us watching from the outside, this genocide has been live streamed to our phones between cat memes and bikini thirst traps, none of which can be thought of as accidental in our precisely engineered algorithmic feeds. This is not just brutality, it's the calculated application of political violence and psychological warfare. Tech platforms we depend on are unambiguous about their ties to Israel. TikTok has appointed a former IDF soldier, Erica Mindell, to lead content moderation. At Meta, Guy Rosen, also former IDF, is in charge of integrity. How is Israel, with the aid of these platforms, weaponizing trauma? Are these tech spaces neutral, or have they become tools of surveillance? To help us understand how trauma functions and to reclaim agency, I'm joined by Ashira Darwish, a Palestinian trauma healer and meditation trainer, specializing in trauma shaped by political violence. Ashira has worked alongside leading figures like Dr Gabor Maté and Dr Kath Temple, and previously served as a journalist for the BBC. She has also worked at Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International during her years in Palestine. Ashira, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Myriam. It's my pleasure.
I guess for people who aren't fully familiar with your journey, can you tell us a little bit about what took you to the work that you do today? Because you've had several phases, haven't you, in your career? So how do you end up a trauma therapist today?
I started my journey as a journalist because I was forced into it in a way. I was in Palestine. I was detained the first time when I was 16 years old. And that detention shaped and changed who I was. I wanted to be a musician. And after that detention, I was like, what musician in this world? And I couldn't unsee the detention center, the police, the system. And I decided I want to be a journalist who helps people. I don't want to be a journalist like the ones who took pictures of me when I was on the floor getting beaten up by soldiers while they were trying to break my knees. So that was the first shift. And I did journalism for years. I was taught by Allah yarhamha Shireen Abu Aqle and some amazing Palestinian teachers in Birzeit University who taught us from the get-go that what you learn in the books has nothing to do with the reality of what you will see on the ground. And all these things that we learn about the protection of journalists and the rights that journalists have, nothing. It doesn't exist in your world because you are black, brown, and you exist in a white supremacist colonial system. Despite that, I still tried my best to fight through the machines and to try to tell our stories. I used every platform possible. I did a reality TV show on YouTube that was aired also on American channels called Sleepless in Gaza and Jerusalem, which is still available now on YouTube, about how life was for Palestinians in all of Palestine and in Gaza. It's It's thinking about what we filmed then in Gaza and what is now Gaza. It's heartbreaking, and we tried in every modality possible. I did fixing for international journalists. I worked with BBC Media Action. I worked here in the UK with BBC London. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, this is doing nothing. And at the realm of the BBC, it was very clear that the editorial team is all very patriarchal men who are allied, support, and have very strong connections with Israel. So it's very hard to break through the system. No matter what the journalists on the ground, how amazing they are, how much they try to get the stories, there's someone on the top. The Palestinians always claim, even if it's a lawyer, even if it's a politician, we claim. And Israelis always state. The IDF states and the Palestinians claim that maybe some people died. The language that is used, everything that is used to suppress our voices and to support the Zionist entity. And then I thought, okay, maybe human rights. So I went into human rights, thinking that it's different. I worked with Human Rights Watch, with Amnesty International, and I was faced with the same. There's always opposition. During this time, of course, while working as a journalist, while being just a normal Palestinian, I had my traumas. And it all came to the point where I was injured in Nabi Saleh village and I was lynched by an Israeli soldier and my spine was severed. And I was paralyzed. And the Western system also medicinally couldn't help me. They said that you cannot fix a spinal injury, and especially after the spine has been severed 70%. And I had to look for alternatives. And the alternative that I had, in order to heal my body, I had to heal my mind. And this began my journey in 2012 into starting the journey of healing. And from there, little by little, when I physically healed, I realized that there's so much mentally that I need to heal. And I dealt with my addictions. I uncovered everything that I was hiding and covering with all the adrenaline shocks and running as a journalist and running as a humanitarian and doing all this to also cover a lot of pain that was stuck within my system. And that brought me into the healing world. And through my self journey of healing, after that, I wanted to share it because I realized that there's also in trauma, in our healing, colonization embedded in everything. The Western modality of talk therapy does not work on occupied brown, black bodies, people who have endured indigenous trauma. And I've noticed also in the Western societies that it's not helping people because the body experiences the trauma and the trauma needs to be released from the body itself. And this connection between spiritual and strength and our resilience, this separation and the individualism that comes from the West is also integral into the therapy world. So I wanted to change that, and I wanted to offer the Palestinians some gateways which come from us into our healing. And I started Catharsis Holistic Healing as a project, started working with former child prisoners, and then we expanded.
You talked about your detention in Israeli prison and the torture that you've experienced there. You discuss this in a film that we'll get on to in a second. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of detention in the Israeli system, about the types of things that you experienced there, and what that can help maybe our audience understand about the ways in which the mass detention of Palestinians, including children, is part of a wider system of control?
My first detention was when I was 16, as I said. I was just in a peaceful protest and I was dragged and beaten up. They tried to break my knees. Then I was punched into a jeep, then harassed and assaulted by the police officer. And the thing that people don't understand is most Palestinian children go through this. And I come from a very privileged background that normally not many of my family members or people from my group endure this experience. But the majority, 99% of Palestinian children, endure some form of harassment and assault by Israeli soldiers. And the detention is what brings on the rest of your life. It changes you, who you are. And the first thing it does is it removes the attachment with your parents. Because at that moment when soldiers are able to take you away from your family, you realize that your family can't help you. And this detachment is very important. For the rest of your life, you're trying to repair the damage that has been done. And what this means also on a political level, I wasn't very politicized. I come from a home that's very politicized, and I wanted to go into music as a way of rejecting. But I knew what was going on, but I wasn't really willing to take an active part until I was detained. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is very personal. And I think what Israel does intentionally is when you take these children, separate them, is it creates a society that's also very much ready to resist and to fight. And they want that. They want us to fight, and they want us to fight while mentally we're not stable. So on a fight, flight, fawn modality where we're just running and trying to do whatever we can to resist. What I would say about my experience is nothing, because I experienced very, very few days in detention, very few moments of what I talk about it in Where the Olive Trees Weep, about the torture in my second arrest.
It's not a small thing.
I know, but this is part of like the Palestinian, like it is big, but in comparison to what my sisters have gone through, and my brothers.
So tell us about that story in context then of what others are people are going through, because you're taken into a shower at a certain point thinking that you're being helped, as it were, because you were having your period at that time. But then the shower turns out to not be a shower.
Yeah, I was basically put in a room where it's hot water and cold water and you can't get out. It's like a coffin and there's nowhere to go. And you're just experiencing whatever there. It's that loss of control completely. And the feeling of being also claustrophobic doesn't help. And this is one of the things that I witnessed. I was taken to the rooms where they have the electricity, and I was strapped to a chair where there's to be electrocuted, but I wasn't electrocuted. I was just threatened by it. And I saw blood in that room on every single corner. It's like a very white room where you have like blood splits. And listening to the stories of the people who were next to me in the detention, it was just one horror story after the other. And then working with the women prisoners afterwards, sexual harassment, beatings, lack of sleep. You never know night from day. You don't know. They intentionally try to make sure that you don't sleep at all. So you're sleep deprived. There's no food. And then there's so many different processes. Sometimes they put you in rooms with the informants who speak Arabic to try to get information from you. And there's physical and emotional torture that has been orchestrated. Like some sick Israeli was sitting and preparing what methods they're going to use. And they tailor them based on what people. One of my friends sat for 30 days in the interrogation, didn't know any day or light, didn't know who was the interrogators, because they made it. She never went to an actual interrogation room, but she was interrogated the whole time. And she lost part of, like, because of the paranoia, she couldn't recognize what's right and what's wrong. And she dissociated from her whole life. Wow. She didn't recognize her life when she came out because everything was mixed between the reality and the illusion. So they orchestrate ways. This is other than the physical torture. The stories that we hear now about raping, about using the bottle to rape Palestinian prisoners has been used for years.
I remember hearing about it back when I was there in 2005. Yeah. It being used, bottles to rape children.
This has been used. Palestinian women have been raped. Listen to the stories of Rasmiya Oude, and listen to how the Americans kicked her out of the US because of Israeli pressure. Israel is a master of torture. And they just use different ways to torture people. Palestinian kids that I worked with, the worst one was also house arrest. I was also put in house arrest. And I was put only one time for 29 days, one time for 15. It breaks the attachment with your parents even further. I hated my mother. She became my jailer. I was like, Mama, I just want to go to the balcony. Like I'm old. I was 25 or something like that. And she wouldn't let me get on the balcony. And I was like...
Because she was worried about you.
She was worried because they make your parents also sign that they will pay thousands of dollars if you get out. And then they tell them that we will rearrest them. So your parent becomes the jailer. And I've seen children who are 9 and 8. And I had to take care of, go interview them and talk to them in their houses And they express the same thing. They're like, take us back to jail. At least we're with other prisoners. We know that we're in jail, but I can't stand my mother and my father being the person who does this to me.
Let me ask you about the film that you did with Gabor Maté and the experience of taking Western methods of psychotherapy to people continuously living under occupation. You already alluded to the idea that certain forms of therapy that are kind of normalized here are not appropriate for that setting. Can you explain kind of some of the limitations of that methodology and how that played out for someone like Gabor, who I know you're very close to and have immense respect for, how that played out when you both visited people to do trauma therapy in the West Bank?
So my experience with talk therapy, my mom was always saying, like, you know, like, therapy is good and you should do it. And I refused when I was a kid because I also was diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age. And then when I was with this detention where I was tortured, I came out and I told my mother, I'm like, I'm not okay. I need immediately to be taken to therapy. And she was shocked because I normally don't. And I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't, I was also paranoid the whole time from the windows because they showed me my bedroom before I left the interrogation. They told me, we have to release you now, but we will be watching you forever. And if you move in your bed and you turn in your bed, I will know.
And then they showed you images
They
of your room?
showed me my room. They showed me my room.
From the inside?
No, from the outside. From my balcony. And from the balcony window, I saw my bed. And so I had the shutters closed all the time. I couldn't shower in the house. And when I went to therapy, haram, it was the first psychotherapist I saw immediately gave me a recipe. She was like, okay, you need to sleep. This will calm you down. I was like, listen, I'm addicted. I know that I'm addicted. I can drink a shot of arak every night and I can push myself to sleep. But I knew when I was in the detention, there was a calming that came to me that told me, don't drink after you get out. Because I knew that the pit will get even deeper. So I told her, I don't want any drugs. Get me something else. So she's like, okay, then you need a psychologist. I was like, yes, great, psychologist. To see the psychologist was another horror show, because for somebody who just came out, who's paranoid about everything, to be sat in the same setting with a desk and somebody asking you questions was terrifying. And then repeating the stories after I kind of trusted the woman was re-traumatizing. And there was also like this line of questioning about me being a woman and why I'm there and why did I decide to even get involved in journalism? Why am I doing things that are like why did I go into the refugee camps and interview the militants? And like psychologically, it put me in a place of also being re-traumatized and feeling guilty and shame about what I did. And after that, I was like, I'm never going to do this again. And it took me about 2 years to recover from the therapy. When I spoke to Dr. Gabor, I think we are some of the luckiest people on earth, by the way, to be living at a time where we have Dr. Gabor with us. The change he has done in the lives of millions of people, not only in Palestine, but any mother in the world who listened to Gabor and understood our trauma and how to deal with our children. I'm sure that was my entry point to contacting him. It was also about finding out about my nervous system and how to deal with my children. And the compassion that he has for addiction, for somebody who's also suffered from addiction, to have somebody come out and say, it's not your fault. This man has changed, I think, mental health forever, and we're very lucky to have him. And I'm very blessed to have been in contact with him. And I told him, okay, listen, like we had the initial conversation. I told him, would you like to come? He's like, yes. And very humble, very immediate support. And I told him also, like, listen, my background with talk therapy doesn't work. And he accepted that. We also have Kath Temple, who gives EFT. And we had Zahira Mouse, who also gives dance therapy. And I was doing active meditation. So, and he understands very well that the situation is not like anywhere else in the world. He understands continuous trauma.
In the film, there's that moment where he says that at one point he fell silent in the group session because he realized, in his words, that he couldn't do anything for these people because he'd been trained in post-traumatic stress disorder, and the people that you were treating, once they stepped out of that session, were stepping right back into the vision of a sniper. And so there was nothing post about the trauma.
To understand what it means for us, if you think about a Palestinian child in Jerusalem and you try to give therapy to this child who still lives in Silwan or Aisawiyah, where the soldiers are always there, and you try to remove the trauma or talk to them about the situation, and you try to mess with the regular system, which is flight. When they see soldiers, they freeze. Alhamdulillah, they freeze. If they don't freeze, they get shot. If you mess with that response, this child might run next time like a normal child. When they see a gun and they run, they will get shot. So there's so many different things in terms of how you work with us. And he was amazing. I was lucky to sit in some of the sessions to translate and just to see, and he did a lot. Just having his presence there and having him tell these women that it's not your fault, that this is normal, and that you did everything that you can do. It changed a lot. And the explanations that he gave about the nervous system, the being in these frozen states where we don't know that we are frozen. I think we were very lucky to have him in the conference, and the women were very lucky and very thankful that they were able to have sessions with him, and that he's still continuing to talk about Palestine, and he's continuing to support us.
You've worked also with some of the children who've come out from Gaza. In fact, you and I both visited some of those children and their families just last year, actually, and I know you've continued working with them. A 2021 Euromed report had shown that 91% of children in Gaza suffered from PTSD as a result of Israeli military attacks. And that was more than 2 years, of course, before the genocide began. A more recent report found that 96% of children feel that their death is imminent, and that might not be just a feeling, sadly. Nearly half say they want to die, which is just, I can't even get my head around that statistic. You've spent considerable time working with these children. What do you observe about the trauma that they've experienced?
I think what people need to understand is the trauma that has happened since the past 2 years, not only to the people in Gaza, to the entire world, is nothing that we have experienced in our lifetimes. It's nothing in comparison to the genocides before, because this is televised. This is on your phone. This is in your home while you're eating. Of course, the children in Gaza are going to say they want to die. If I was there, I would want to die too. Why would you want to be in a place that's constantly bombed, where you lose your entire family and you see people you love getting burned alive, and the whole world is watching it happen, and you're starved to death, and you have nowhere safe to go? Of course, you'd rather be dead. There's no logic in wanting to be alive in a place like Gaza. The people who are there, who are still trying to find ways of hope and sing, and these people are angels. They're not normal. There's nothing normal about being in a situation like a genocide and wanting to stay alive. And one of the women that we met said if we want to help her, we would help her how to kill herself in a way that's Islamically appropriate. She wanted to die. She had one child, and she blamed the child for her having to stay alive. All she wanted was to die and go meet the rest of her family. Her husband, her other children. She has one child who's left. She has to take care of him.
So let me ask you this in the context of the type of psychotherapy that you undertake, right? You say that you believe it's possible to heal trauma. And I wanted to ask you this because there were other stories that we experienced when we were there. Feel free to share what you feel is appropriate. That made me really question whether you can heal trauma that profound. Has Israel succeeded in breaking some people? With the right methodologies, the right support, can people be healed?
Definitely they broke our spirit. They broke the spirit of the whole world, not only the Palestinians and not only the people of Gaza. The thing that I know in my heart is that we are resilient. And from the kids that we saw also, there was despair, but there was this extreme will to live.
There's life, there's life.
And there was passion for it. The children, I think, we have a better chance than the adults.
Okay.
I think with the children, we have a chance because they're also more resilient and they're still growing, and we have some hope. With the adults, from the ones that I met, I think it's going to be a very, very, very hard battle. And not only in Gaza, in the West Bank. People don't understand what's happening. It's called a crime against humanity because it affects everyone. And it means each and every human in this earth, after witnessing this genocide, is not the same person.
Right.
Can you eat at home?
No, I 100% hear this. I say to people all the time, my DNA has changed. There is a pre-me and there is a post.
Exactly. All of us are in the post.
Yeah.
The entire world, even if they are perpetrators and they think that they're safe, somatically, your body cannot accept watching babies being burned alive and be okay. You can scroll past it, but it doesn't mean that your body, your health is okay. And in the West Bank, if you can imagine all of what's happening in Gaza and people are like, how's the West Bank? The West Bank is suppressed by the Palestinian Authority and by Israel, and it's impossible to speak up. And they still try to speak up. But to have yourself be in a situation like this and be quiet is far worse than being under the genocide itself. Because they're suppressing each and every single one of their emotions and pretending to be okay when everything is happening around them and to them means that this suppression is all going to be, we're going to witness illnesses, we're going to witness problems in the entire nation. And I've seen it already with the diaspora. Any person who has witnessed genocide in the past, who has experienced being a refugee, the Iraqis, the Afghanis, the Congolese, the African Americans, everyone who's experienced racism, the natives, the indigenous, what happens is your genes wake up. Just as you say, your genes have changed. People's genes of trauma wake up in this time because this is reminiscent. It activates their senses to what their ancestors have felt. And now we know. We have research to prove that trauma is passed intergenerationally. So when this trauma is awakened in the body, you have to find a way to heal it. The somatic work and the work that I've come through helps a lot and allows us to build ways and bridges for people to heal. And I think one very important thing for people to understand is being silent is the silent killer. This is where trauma is going to live, in the silent bodies. The active bodies that are on the streets, that are protesting, that are actively moving to protest the genocide, you will be okay.
Well, let's talk about that, because I do wonder sometimes about, the impact also on those of us who are observing. But before we get to that, I just want to ask you about whether you have a sense of, I think people who may be new to the conflict, to the occupation, may not be aware of the extent to which Israel has used psychological warfare against Palestinians for decades, throughout the entire occupation. And so when I'm observing certain tactics on the ground, whether that is the continuous displacement, whether that is the airdropping of aid when there are multiple entry points, including by sea, into Gaza, you don't need to drop it by air. Or when I observe the food points where people have to walk for miles and then get shot at to get food, I think to myself, these things are engineered. These things are by design. And if they are by design, what is the psychological objective of these strategies? Why are the Israelis using these tactics beyond obviously making food itself an act of life and death?
They are engineered completely. They're very smart in torture. And they know exactly how to dehumanize us. Also, having these people running, very poor, impoverished, the look of people while they reach to the food centers is already dehumanized to the West. The way they see us, these men running, and the Hunger Games in a way. The way that they play with us and they taunt us is very much engineered for the West. To also, it activates adrenaline in people who are watching. There's a part that is trying to push people to want to consume it also. They want to consume the war in Gaza. They want to enjoy it. And you hear videos of Israelis saying, yeah, we like to watch. We want to see. And people are saying, oh, the Israelis don't know. No, they know and they enjoy. There's There's a way that we're dehumanized. There's a way that they're also forcing us to fight with each other. The way that they're working on the deconstruction of the communities and having people moving back and forth, back and forth. This is all because Israel understood the importance of the tribe for the Palestinians. In 1948, the biggest mistake that was done that made us still resist until today is that our communities weren't dispersed. The refugees left to Lebanon, from Palestine to Lebanon, they stayed in the same streets, in the same neighborhoods, close to each other in the refugee camp. They called the street based on the name of the villages they were ethnically cleansed from, and they still marry until today from the same families. Gaza was a big example of that. It's a big refugee camp, and people maintain the tribe. And the tribe is unbelievably important in times of war. And it's what creates the resilience. It's what creates the generational knowledge. It's what keeps us going strong. So they're fighting that so strongly now and dispersing some families in Egypt, dispersing some families in different places around the world. They're breaking the tribe to break our ability to come back and to resettle.
What about some of the videos that we are also seeing of Israeli soldiers filming themselves sometimes torturing or tormenting Palestinians? And there's a video that was circulated recently of the soldiers tormenting this poor little boy who must be about, between 9 and 11 years old, small boy. And he's crying and he's actually, completely petrified in this video. And I was thinking to myself again, we had Bassem Youssef on the show a few months ago, and he said, nothing that they put out is, accidental. Nothing that you see put out by IDF soldiers, whether that's them wearing underwear or then that's them looting, is coincidental. It is a part of a deliberate strategy. So how do you interpret these images that are coming out as part of the wider picture of psychological warfare happening?
They're trying to scare people. They're trying to scare people from moving, from acting, from talking in the West Bank and in all of Gaza. Also, the images with the lingerie for the Palestinian man, it's breaking our Palestinian men. And knowing that they're women, if they're doing this to their clothes, what's going to happen to them if they capture the woman? This is pushing people to move and evacuate when they want them to evacuate, knowing there's a risk that your child will be taunted like that. Also, it means that in the West Bank, the parents will be trying to strangle their children from going out to protest and being in any way active, trying to shut down the televisions, not let them know what's happening in Gaza, and keeping people inside the homes so that nothing happens. The stories of rape didn't come out by accident. The sexual harassment of the Palestinian women prisoners did not come by accident. They're doing this specifically so people, they know our society, they study it, and we have, sadly, people amongst them who are from the society that support them. So they know how to break down the psyche of people.
So you see this as part of one of the branches of, pushing back against the resistance that exists within all Palestinians,
Yep.
I guess. There are also now, by now, lots of well-documented examples of IDF soldiers, urinating on people, forcing them to act like animals, people being attacked by dogs. There are allegations that have been reported, even The Guardian, of the return of certain people with missing organs, desecration of graves. I mean, as a psychotherapist, looking at the level of depravity that is being exercised by Israeli society. And then, recently we saw, a video coming out from Tel Aviv where people are being asked, like, oh, how's things in Tel Aviv? And they're like, oh, it's so great here. Like, it's a vibe. Like, the food's awesome. How do you make sense of this as a psychotherapist, of this society who can, on one hand, be involved in literally torturing children, shooting them in the head, and come home and, like, party in a G-string and play beach volleyball? Like, how does this work?
This is part of the trauma that the Israelis endure. And the way that the Israeli society operates, they're put in states of fear, constant fear, since the Holocaust until today, especially in Israel. The Jews who are outside had a chance to at least do some healing. The ones who are in the state were given guns told that this is the Nazis, go after them. And they remain on a state of fight flight since then. And they pass it to generations. They've dehumanized us to the point where they can't see us as humans. And the religion opens the way for that. They have verses that allow for us to be killed, raped, maimed, under the disguise of being strangers and goyim. The whole society is a sick society, in a sense, and they all need trauma therapy. When you talk about soldiers committing suicide, the violence, and internally, when you're taught as a child to discriminate against one person, you don't recognize that you discriminate only against one. You have the system operation, and the operation works on everybody. So you discriminate also against other people in your community. This is why there's so much racism within the Israeli society in the different levels of the hierarchy of the Israeli society. They're taught, and this is why you see them when they're coming to suppress protesters now in Tel Aviv. There's severe violence because they can't distinguish. Those who were shooting in the West Bank come back and they're also very violent, because this is the structure that the people have been put in.
Have you heard of the concept of the imperial boomerang, right? The violence that is enacted by the colonizer in the colonial grounds will return to the center of empire, right? Do you think there's like an imperial psychological boomerang, that the violence that you inflict on people on the ground, then when you return to your societies, cannot help but infect the society that you're in, even at a psychological level?
Yeah, we've been looking at videos of soldiers committing suicide. There's soldiers very much unable to function, fighting with their wives, getting the very domestic violence rising. All of being in a state of doing these things. In Gaza, it will come home. It will all come home to eat them.
If you're enjoying the show, why not join our Patreon community? The Tea is more than a YouTube show. It's a space to foster meaningful change together. By becoming a member, you're supporting that mission. And if you join our top tier, you'll get exclusive ad-free episodes too. So join us now, link in our bio. There's already some evidence of that with, as you say, the high number of soldiers who are coming home with, what they call PTSD and various forms of trauma that they're struggling to deal with. For those of us outside of Palestine who have been watching this for the last 2 years, there is so much to unpack about how this is impacting us. And I say that not to center those of us on the outside, because this is always first and foremost about the suffering of the Palestinians. But there's also something about the way that we are consuming that pain, consuming that suffering, and often feeling impotent in the face of it. So why don't we start there? Like, what are some of the psychological consequences that we should be alert to for those of us who want to be helping, want to be supporting, are seeing these images first thing when we wake up all day until we go to bed, and then feeling like no matter what we do, nothing has managed to stop this genocide?
So one of the reasons we're still seeing news from Palestine is because they want you to feel like this. Zuckerberg and the US decide to snap. No Palestinian content comes out of Gaza. They can do it in a heartbeat. And they're able to do it. So we need to understand that the reason why we're seeing things is they're still allowing us to see it. And we need to question why they're allowing us to see it. If you're an activist, my recommendation is don't spend your time on Instagram. You know what's going on. You know what is happening. You don't need the fire, except if you feel that it ignites your movement, then allow it to watch it to ignite your movement. But make sure that your consumption is limited so that you can stay in action. You don't want to get numb. You don't want to get to the frozen state. And most of the people are getting to the burnout stages from social media, so they escape into other things. And mentally, they're not doing well. Because also the juxtaposition of a dancing party and an advertisement about kids going back to school, then kids being bombed, your brain is not made for this.
No.
And what happens is you become desensitized. And the desensitization between the images and also going from the adrenaline and to be in fight-flight mode when you feel that you're so far away, you can't do anything, you get into the frozen state. And you're stuck in the frozen state, doom scrolling, and we lose you. We lose you because we need activists. We need people on the ground. We need people in the right mind to act. This is why I'm still moving around the world and doing retreats. The idea is we need the activists and the Palestinians who are abroad to get out of the frozen state and back into the action and to rebuild the resilience and resistance.
What do you say to people who say, we're not seeing these images on the news. No one's reporting this. I need to share it, otherwise people won't see it. And I experienced this myself as a dilemma. When it was the early days, I, for example, would not share images of identifiable dead people. And I would talk about it on my platforms. And now I've got to the point, and I'm conscious of this myself, that I do share those images. And I think part of why I share it is because of the anger. It's like, can I shock people into reacting? But also, I'm aware that there's something really dehumanizing about sharing people who are deceased. Like, there's something sacred about death, especially in religious traditions. You don't just parade your dead. So I just wanted to get your view on that, because I can see arguments on both sides.
So one thing to identify is there are videos coming from people in Gaza, and they ask you to share, like, and this is also for them to make financial benefit. So that, do it. And what I would say is allocate a time. As an activist or as somebody who's involved in the cause, allocate an hour, and then that's it. The rest of your day, you're actively working in order to end the genocide. Supporting the voices to come out from Gaza is super important. Supporting the voices to come out from the West Bank is very important. But understanding that it's not going to change people's minds. And I keep telling people, don't put your energy and waste it on changing the minds of people who have seen kids being killed for 2 years and haven't moved. We're not going to change them. The post is not going to change them. It's been happening for 2 years. I was sitting with somebody from the IT and data research, and he said the Palestinian campaign on the social media has been the best campaign in the history of social media.
What does that mean?
It means because Israel has put billions of dollars into suppressing what's coming out from Gaza, and the Palestinians have been able to successfully break the algorithms and reach people.
But isn't this the challenge, is that many of us feel like these are the platforms that have allowed us to break through and share information and communicate and, change people's perceptions, but they're also the same platforms that are run by IDF sympathizers, former IDF soldiers, people who have, been very clear about their commitment to supporting Israel. We know how much content has been suppressed by Meta. I think it's 90% of the posts that were flagged by Israel were taken down by Meta. So, how do we balance that? Because the platforms themselves are compromised.
I think we need to find alternative platforms. I think we need to look for alternative places where we can communicate. And I think the most important thing is you can share the information. Just don't make it your whole life. Make sure that you're moving. Make sure that you're acting. That's more important for the people in Gaza. The news is out there. We've broken the algorithm. The voices are reaching. Anas al-Sharif was reporting every day and reporting on his imminent death. And people were sharing that instead of trying to make a campaign to push the Israeli embassies, to write letters to them, to safeguard the journalists. Journalists weren't put under pressure in the Western world to act to support their colleagues and to protect them. There's a lot that we can do that's not on the social virtual reality.
I want to ask you about something you alluded to, which is the way that the algorithm is also feeding the information to us. And you rightly pointed out that for many of us, we are literally scrolling from a bikini shot, a Hermes handbag, and then, children in a morgue, bodies. And we know that the algorithm is something that is very deliberately engineered. The companies in question spend millions of dollars on behavioral psychologists, and there are entire teams of people whose job it is to curate the content that we are watching. And yet, I don't think that I've seen anyone really analyze why, from a psychological perspective, we are being fed this kind of information in this way? Why are they showing it to us like that?
So you can become numb.
And why does it make us numb to consume it between sort of, you know, a funny video and a consumer video, for example?
Because of the dysregulation of your nervous system. And it becomes a normal thing for you to watch children get the adrenaline going, and then you go into a video of a comedian or something funny, and you use the adrenaline for that, and then you go into another one, which is chopped up kids, and then you're numb. And people don't understand the numbness. It's your nervous system. It's not a choice that you become numb. And when you're like that, you're more likely to be doing more scrolling because you're seeking dopamine. You're seeking adrenaline so that you can feel alive and so that you can go back into action, but it doesn't push you into action. It sits you in the house scrolling.
On that note, and I alluded to this in the introduction to the show, we know, for example, that at Meta, Guy Rosen is a former Israeli officer. He's now the chief information security officer. And I even find that title really dystopian. He's chief information security officer. Information needs security now. Can we just take a second with that? Jordana Cutler is a former Netanyahu advisor. She now oversees Meta policy on Palestine-related content. We now know that Google is in the middle of a 6-month, $45 million contract to amplify propaganda with Netanyahu's office. Facebook have racked in millions from paid ads from the IDF. And in July, TikTok, which of course at the beginning of all of this was lauded as like the platform that was really helping to galvanize young people who didn't previously know much about what was happening in Palestine. At TikTok, they've just hired Erica Mindell, who is a former IDF soldier, to be in charge of content moderation. This is someone who had spoken previously publicly about Tel Aviv's 2014 war on Gaza as having shaped her Zionist identity. I raise all of this not to get into conspiracies, not get into paranoia. These are the facts around the platforms that we are sharing our information on, that we think of as having saved us from the grips of, you know, legacy media's biases. Given the long history of Israeli psyops, and for those who aren't familiar, I would advise you to take a little time out to research how Israel is a leader in psyops. What kind of psyops do you think, or do you see already operating in the way that these platforms are curating information or getting us to think about the world? What is it, do you think, that people need to be attentive to from a psychological perspective, from a mental health perspective, about how, you know, very clearly now it's apparent that, you know, pro-Israel voices are working with these platforms where we think we are getting, you know, content directly from the source?
These tools, these platforms are there to share information, but they're not there to liberate us. It's very important for people to send letters to the MPs instead of scrolling. It's very important to be outside asking, and they replace our community. They replace our direct interaction with people. And when activists sit together in community in a meeting, that's when action happens. It's not virtual. We made the mistake in the Arab Revolution, thinking that these platforms will help us, will get to people, but eventually on the ground, they destroyed us. And having all of our information put out for them to use, we know how they're using the information to target, kill people. For the Palestinians, it's important to get the message out. For those who are on the support, it's important to share their messages 1 hour a day, maximum. To allocate time for that, for digital activism. But it's not your life. Your activism needs to be on the ground. Your activism needs to be taking Israel into courts. Your activism needs to be directed towards ending the genocide physically. Information is out there about this genocide. It's been 2 years. How are you going to shift somebody's brain? They've seen the trucks of people being loaded out of Gaza. We've seen the flotilla, but we need people to be standing in front of the Israeli embassies to protect the flotilla instead of only sharing on social media. We need people on the ground. And we need to realize that the reason why they allow us to have this gateway is because of that. They want virtual protests, and they want the desensitization of people to images.
And it's very clear, as you alluded to, that pushback is well underway on all of these platforms, right? So if we look at some of the latest announcements, TikTok has just announced that 80% of its US stake will be handed to a group of investors, Oracle, Silver Lake, and Andreessen Horowitz, as part of a deal that Washington and Beijing are currently finalizing. Now, basically, America is essentially going to get its own version of TikTok after the 2024 law forced ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, to sell or essentially face a ban in the US. But here's the catch. These billionaire investors who are set to control it have deep financial and ideological ties to Israel. So let's take Oracle, for example, which will host all US TikTok data. It's led by Safra Katz, an Israeli-American CEO who once said employees not loyal to both America and Israel have no place at Oracle. So now if you want to get a job at Oracle, you have to basically swear your allegiance to Israel, because apparently now that is the litmus test for being a decent American. The co-founder, Larry Ellison, is an American billionaire who donated to the Friends of the IDF, one of the largest ever individual donations. And he's, of course, long backed pro-Israeli policies. We tend to think of these apps as fundamental to information sharing. But you alluded there to the Arab uprisings. And I wanted to ask you whether you feel, as I do now, that the performance, the role, the function of these platforms today is no longer information sharing, it's database compiling. I now see them as surveillance platforms where lists are being compiled, where profiles are being collated of each of us and what we believe and what we post and what we share and the intimacy of what we scroll when we think no one's watching. Like, to what extent do you feel that we bought into the idea that these platforms had liberatory potential, and now they contain the potential for us all to be repressed in the most intense and intimate ways?
And Anna, I've never had like complete faith and trust in these because they come from the West. So there's always something, there's always a catch. And we did believe at some point in the Arab Revolution that they were useful to break the censorship by the governments until the governments took over the instruments. And they started using them against us as activists. So the lessons need to be learned. These are not our tools. Our tools are on the ground, in community, in campaigning, in organizing, in working on the ground again. And these tools, they can be used by people who have no ability to be on the ground. There's a whole generation of people who can't get out of the house and run to the protest, but are good at sharing information. Allow them to do that. For the younger generation, we need to tap out. Tap out of the system. Tap out of TikTok. Boycott. Get out of all of these tools that are not going to be useful. If people want to get to you, then they need to come to the platform which represents you, which represents your ideals. And for the rest of the people who are in these social networks, seeing an image of a child in Gaza burning again will not change who they are and what they are. We need to give up on trying to convert the people who are not going to be converted.
Let me ask you a little bit about self-care, which of course is the de rigueur notion online that we need to all be looking after ourselves, setting boundaries, protecting our peace. They're thrown around a lot, these terms, in everyday conversation. And you'll have seen, if you're online, this quote by the American activist and writer Audre Lorde paraded around as a meme, that caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And that's an act of political warfare. Now, I, of course, get why that makes sense in Audre Lorde's situation. She's an African-American queer woman who was also going through cancer more than once. But more broadly, is self-care always an act of political warfare? And how do we distinguish between important self-care and, I suppose, that which takes us away from resistance?
Yeah, you need to be careful that it doesn't become another way of bypassing the genocide and bypassing your duty and your people's need to move and act. Self-care is important for activists. Self-care is important for activists to continue so that we don't burn out, so that we can keep going. And I say this and say it, like, we don't need burned out activists. we need strong people who are capable of going. And going means that you take care of yourself every now and then, rest, recuperate, re-energize. And in the Palestinian way, in order to do sumud, we do dabke, we eat our food, we're in our community, we build up the energy so that we can fight harder and stronger. The main thing is what your aim is. Mm-hmm. If your aim is to liberate Palestine, is to end the colonialist systems, to end the whole robotization of the world, and to care about Earth and humanity, then you have a goal. Take care of yourself in order to achieve that goal, but don't bypass your emotions. People need to understand that when you're in action is when your body produces serotonin and dopamine. You'll get the happiness, and you'll be able to not go through trauma if you're in action. People told me, like, how come you didn't get like heavy trauma from the years of protesting? It's because I was in action. When you're a paramedic, and this has been studied, paramedics and doctors, they don't suffer the same trauma as people who are bystanding and watching, because there's this act of moving. And when you're in the protest, when you're making the signs, when you're in the community, when you're going, when you're active, you are not going to be traumatized. But when you bypass what's going on and you try to sit at home and scroll into happy land, that's when the trauma sits in your body. So for the activists, and that's all who I care about, those who are in action to end this genocide. I don't care about the people who are perpetrating the genocide. They're going to be traumatized far worse.
And let me ask you a question, just, pushing back in a way on that point, or on not healing the colonizers' trauma, because of course you alluded to in the beginning of this conversation the idea that it's their, the trauma of the narrative of the Holocaust as a kind of consistent and ongoing, enduring threat against the Jewish people that drives a lot of the fear and violence that we're seeing today. Is healing not also important on their end? Of
course, you can see Jewish Voices for Peace. You can see the Jewish activists who are loud and are proud and are moving for Palestine right now. They are healing their genocide trauma. They weren't able to speak up at the time of the Holocaust. They weren't able to fight for their ancestors. They weren't able to fight as survivors for themselves. And they weren't able to say, no, this is not happening. When your body doesn't understand time, it understands emotions, and now the sensations that are brought by the genocide in Gaza wake up also Holocaust survivors and their ancestry. And this is why you see so many Jewish people standing up and screaming. You see so many indigenous people standing up and screaming and saying no, because this is the first time they have the ability to say no. And saying no now to the genocide in Palestine is saying no to the Holocaust, is saying no to Srebrenica and to the genocide in Serbia. It's saying no to the ethnic cleansing of the indigenous communities. This is how they are healing. This is what Jewish trauma should look like, Jewish trauma healing through activism for the end of the genocide.
You've previously said for Palestine, the trauma is collective and the healing is collective too. Why is community so central to healing specifically for Palestinians?
Because we are tribal and because we believe in the connection. And I have witnessed it in my work, working individually versus in the collective, and how we are able to support each other, how our bodies physically heal when we are together. When Peter Levine says it's not the trauma that you endure that creates the trauma. It's being alone when you endure the trauma. If someone is physically holding you, then they co-regulate you. And it's very important for us. And also because we culturally come from a very collective, communal setting, it's that space that we heal in.
You referred to the dancing of Debka being a form of healing. Tell us a bit about how you break down what actually happens in the dance as part of an actual form of healing therapy.
First, the collective coming together in a group, re-regulating your nervous system with other people who have different kind of dysregulation. And I've seen it with the children who need, like I said, to be reattached, this feeling of connection that comes in the group, the harmony of being physically together. We are made of electricity. We are made of energy. When your heart stops, they don't throw water on you. They shock you so that your heart works again. And our electricity, when we are sitting in a setting together, starts moving between us as a collective. And the same thing for the music. Music is vibration. It's electricity that goes into the brain and that shifts. This is why when you're sad, you listen to some kind of music. And this is why, for me, my healing is putting some Palestinian music and screaming in the car and pumping myself, or doing debke, and I feel like I'm earthing, I'm grounding, and I'm rebuilding like my self-power and my self-worth and my strength. It's because these waves, the electricity moves and changes your brain. It changes the way that your moods are going. It changes what hormones you're producing. And when done in a collective setup, your body feels regulated and able to heal. You need to shake your body to remove the electricity that's stuck from trauma. We see kids in Gaza, some of them when they come immediately out of the shock, out of the rubble, they're shaking. This is the normal system of releasing all the electrical charge that was stuck when they were under the rubble. Your body needs to shake, it needs to move, it needs to release the electricity. And doing it together, there's nothing more healing than that.
So what does liberation psychotherapy mean, the type that you're engaged in?
It means, first of all, identifying where the people come from, what the lineage is carrying, and understanding that our lineage comes with a lot of baggage. Our ancestors have given us much of the trauma, but they also give us the keys to healing. Just as trauma is transferred, healing codes are also transferred, and unpacking them. Each and every individual is able to do it. It's being in a space which allows you to open up these healing codes that you have, and to be able to release the trauma from the body. And I think liberation psychology, the idea is to decolonize our minds also from the concept of what therapy is brought to us. We need to understand that the therapy modality that was created wasn't created for us. Because if you take a person from prison and you start telling them that it was their fault, because the system shows you that it's their fault, it's the complete opposite of what we do in liberation psychology. We understand your need to resist. And we say that what you did is right. So we don't shame you, don't put guilt on you. If you're an addict, then we understand that there's years of intergenerational trauma that comes through. And we understand that the indigenous gave us medicine. And this medicine is the best medicine that was given to us. And if we just go back to what is from them and what is original to us, then we can heal through it. The debke that was given to us, the songs that our grandparents gave to us, the movements, the dances, the Sufi whirling, the medicine given to the natives, the ayahuasca, all these forms of medicines that were handed down generation to generation. This is us, and we shouldn't go to the West to find solutions. And most of the modalities in the West that are now embodied, if you look into them, they all come down and they take from the indigenous. Now they are also trying to appropriate that culture, appropriation of yoga and everything that comes from the indigenous communities from around the world.
I wanted to ask you about Naomi Klein has this concept of disaster capitalism. And the idea is, of course, that certain disasters either are curated or occur and that there's an economic capitalization on those disasters. Do you ever think about there being such a thing as psychological disaster? I sometimes wonder whether there is something about the fact that, younger people today just keep living through successive existential crises. It's like wars, COVID, the economic, recession after recession, like everything feels like it's disintegrating. And of course, not to mention the climate. So people are existing in a constant roller coaster of absolute existential fear. And I wonder whether you feel that that is to some extent engineered or capitalized on by those who maybe find ways to benefit off those emotions.
It's a direct impact of living in a consumerist, capitalist, imperialistic system. Everybody's medicated so that they can survive, because you can't survive the system. You're not a rat. You're not born to race and work every single day like a machine and to be educated in systems that separate mother and child. The whole entire concept of capitalism and consumerism is to create robots who consume. And for them to be able to survive this, they've created mental health diseases and they've created mental health medicine that supposedly helps. ADHD, give them some pills. They have depression, give them some happies. Everybody's on happy pills in the Western world. And these pills are just to make you be able to function within the system. And then you get the diseases that then, again, the profit comes back to the pharmaceutical companies that are making billions from the happy pills, and then from you getting ill from all the happy pills that you're taking. It's the disease is capitalism, and the healing is the tribe and the community.
To corroborate some of what you're saying, in England alone, antidepressant items went up from 18 million in 1998 to 71 million in 2018. And 2023 to 2024 figures was 89 million. So that's a multifold increase in prescriptions, which, and I think we find that replicated across different continents. And I guess the question is, the why, and your why is that, capitalism is keeping us sort of in a system that's not designed for us, right? So it keeps us deeply unhealthy. In his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire argues that oppression doesn't just exploit people materially, right? He argues that it also conditions their mind. He says, and I quote, "The oppressed, having internalized the image of the oppressor, adopt an alienated view of themselves." In other words, domination, involves the oppressed seeing themselves through the lens of the oppressor. How do you help people under occupation, under conditions of repression, not identify with the image that the colonizer or oppressor is imposing on them?
That's everything that we do in Catharsis Holistic Healing. This is the base of it, is to bring back the person from the trauma to being yourself before the trauma, and understanding removing the guilt and the shame. Because the thing that they want us to think when they put us in prison is there's something wrong with you, not the system. And it's not only in Israel, it's also in the US. There's more black and brown bodies in prisons than there was slaves. And this is a system that tells them that there's something wrong with them inherently. It's not racism and discrimination that puts them in that place. And addiction within the indigenous communities. These diseases are orchestrated. They're created for us to feel that we're unworthy, that there's something wrong with us, that we are less than them. And this is the whole concept of white supremacy and privilege. And what we do is we try to bring the person into that place of feeling their self-worth, recognizing that it is the normal to resist when you are oppressed, and it's okay. And the problem is with the rest of the world, not with you as an individual.
Let me ask you about rage. I myself have experienced levels of rage. In fact, you've probably seen me rage on more than one occasion. I'm not necessarily prone to rage like that. Typically, that's definitely something over the last 2 years that has become an intense emotion in me, and I think in many people. And at the same time, I don't, from my, our spiritual tradition, the Islamic tradition, like anger is not a positive thing to cultivate within the self. But does it still have a function? Is it a pathology? Like, how do you see the role of rage in this moment? How do you respond to rage within yourself? How do you advise those of us who just are living in a state of, I've said it many times before, of incandescent rage?
We're supposed to have rage. And I don't think it has to do with the religion. On the contrary, our religion does embrace the rage. And you have to embrace the rage. And suppressing the rage is where the problems begin. And most people who are having the rage problems, it's because they're not able to express the rage. And one place that we do release is through these trauma workshops. And the work that I do, there's a very nice place for rage. Because we need to experience it, and we love it, and we welcome it, and we ask people to start screaming, to shout, to hit, to release that rage, because rage tells you when your boundaries are broken. How you use the rage is another issue. Whether you use it in the house to break glass or to break a door when you're angry, or when you feel the rage and you're like, something has happened. I will just breathe through the rage. Not breathe to suppress the rage, but breathe to accept the rage and welcome it and understand it. So when you want to punch that wall, be like, I really want to punch that wall, and this is justified. What's happening is not right. Where can I move you, rage? How can I get you out? Does it need to be in a protest? Does it need to be in finding out a space where you can scream your lungs out. I feel that we need to go out on mountains and scream forever from the images that we have seen, from what we have witnessed over the past 2 years. People, we need like major punching bags in every city, in every town. So for people, and to put Israel, the IDF sign on it and punch in every walkway around the world so that we can, because there is rage and it's normal and it's natural. If you don't have rage in this moment in history, that is when you know there's a problem.
What's the connection between rage and violence and boundaries and trauma?
The colonialist image is that violence is bad and violence is wrong. Why is violence wrong? And when is it wrong is the highlight. Violence is wrong when it's used by the oppressed. But state violence is not seen as violence.
No.
When the US troops go into Iraq and they kill 1 million, not very violent. When the Iraqis throw a shoe on a president, why the level of violence? The Palestinians were supposed to resist, and there's so many of our supporters who are like, peaceful, non-violent resistance. We're taught this from a very young age. For me, it was very important. Every time I talk, I say non-violent resistance. I was arrested at a peaceful protest in order to ensure that I am not seen as a terrorist, God forbid, or that I am pointed somewhere. And this is part of how we are colonized emotionally. And our brain is told that this is the kind of violence. No, violence is okay. Violence is okay as if it's in the face of a genocide. Stop the state violence, end genocides, stop controlling people and masses, and then we are all peaceful.
Let me ask you about the resistance movements, because you have had actually very particular insights into some of these figures. You interviewed many of them as part of your journalistic work, and in many ways you got kind of some of the closest interviews we've seen with leading figures within the Palestinian resistance. What about these individuals and their reasons for engaging in militarized resistance would you think it's important for people to understand, I guess, particularly from a psychological perspective?
I never saw more love than I saw in these resistance fighters, and softness. In one case, when I went to an interview with somebody from Hamas, they put a bag on my head and they were driving me to, and I was like, Ashira, you're gonna die. Like, what are you doing? You might get there, they might kill you. And I get there, and of course they don't come close to you, they don't touch you, you're a woman. So even when they had to move me around with the bag, they found a woman to come and grab me so they don't touch me. And they sat very far away, and they were just very soft. And when I started speaking to them about why, and like, you're young, you're like, you're dead. I'm talking to a dead man. I know that you're not going to make it. There's no way. And all of the stories that they come with is stories of love. It's either love to the land, love to their mother, love to their brother who was shot, love to their brother, to their uncle and cousin who was killed and assassinated by the Israelis that drove him to come and fight. They fight for love. They don't fight for destruction. And when you ask them about their dreams, they have huge dreams: to get married to the girl they love, to have a house, and to pray in the mosque when they can, and have food. It's not like they want to control the world, or they just want to be able to live in peace in their village, in their refugee camp, without somebody coming and killing the people they love. And they fight for so much love. Zakaria Zbeidi, when I interviewed him, it was the same.
Tell us who he is for those who aren't familiar.
Zakaria Zbeidi is a Palestinian freedom fighter who was arrested by Israel. He's now released. He's also one of the resistance fighters who escaped from prison using a spoon. And I understood the moment I heard the story. I was like, of course he's going to do it. He's so passionate for life. And when I interviewed him, it was all clear. It was like, I love my family. I love my refugee camp. I love my neighbors. And if I don't fight, they're going to come and kill us.
What would you say is the main thing that's misunderstood about these figures in, legacy media?
We're demonized. People think that these guys are demons, that they want to kill everybody. They don't want to kill anybody if nobody comes to their house.
Fancy that.
Nobody. They would be sitting in their homes, and most of them are empaths. If you talk about the spiritual softness and the energy of these people, empaths, heartbroken, cannot see the injustice, and they have to stand up and fight for it. If you shut down, you're more likely to be able to succeed in living in Palestine without fighting. If you're able to control, and I did it. I had to cut a lot of my emotions. I learned to be a journalist and to have two sides, to look at the Israelis with having the right to exist so that I can exist and I can live a normal materialistic life as they wanted. You shut down your heart. But if you want your heart to be open, then you will fight. You will fight with all the passion and love you have for the things that you hold dear. I will fight for olive trees, and I'm willing to die for them. People don't understand it. I love the taste of olives. I love smelling them. I sit and touch trees and hug them. I'm a tree hugger. And I will fight for my trees so I can hug them and love them. I will fight to go back to Palestine and smell the jasmine trees in the spring. We love the land. We love it to the point that we will fight and die for it. Whereas Israelis don't love it. They wouldn't be able to bomb it. They wouldn't be able to use so much anger and hate if they loved this land.
And chemical poisoning. I mean, there's evidence in the West Bank of the poisoning by nuclear waste of the land, which, you know, I think to your point is, you know, how do you spread, waste that will affect the environment, the animals, the water, not to mention the people? If you truly care about the land, it's a real question for those kind of who are making the argument that this is somewhere they long for. Last question I want to ask you about is Palestine has been recognized by the British government, by the Belgians, by Australia and Canada. This is being heralded as a big moment in the Palestinian liberation struggle, but the genocide is ongoing. And I want to ask you about how you sustain hope and action and cultivate the necessary optimism at a time like this.
I have hope for my children. I have hope in the generation of kids there who, despite it all, still want to sing and dance and still want to make friends and still want to make art and still want to play.
Yeah.
They give me hope, and I have faith, an unwavering faith, yaqeen in the liberation of Palestine, and it's closer now than we have ever been before. I have faith that we will see Palestine free, and this gives me the hope and the energy to keep going. Every time I try to feel breaking down and I get burned out, and I'm human, I get burned out, I re-engage with all the tools that I have so that I can pick myself up and keep going for the kids and for Palestine and for humanity. It's not only Palestine that we want to liberate. We want to liberate the world. If we liberate Palestine and the Amazon dies, we have a big problem. I want this world that I love to survive, and this gives us the hope. Keep the music alive, I would say to every activist. Keep the dabke alive. Keep the joy and the love of what you want and what you dream of Palestine to be when we are liberating it. And keep envisioning Palestine as free. See it free. Know that it's going to be free. And just have that. Have that in your heart in every move that you take.
Ashira, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tea. These are the kinds of conversations that really count, and we would love to hear your take. So don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. To stay in the loop with all things The Tea, make sure you've subscribed to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, links in our bio. And as always, if you're ready for a bit more, come and join us on Patreon. You'll get exclusive access, bonus content, and a voice in shaping what comes next. Stay awake, and we'll see you soon for more tea. Thanks for tuning into The Tea. If this episode resonated with you, drop a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And why not dive into these other episodes we think you'll love? Let's keep the conversation going.